Ever notice how legal dramas, they really love to crank up the drama, right?
Ah,
Objections flying left and right, witnesses cracking under the pressure. It's all very captivating, of course. But the reality of legal argument, well, it's often a far cry from those Hollywood courtroom showdowns.
yeah, absolutely. And, that's where mooting comes in. It sort of like strips away all the theatrics and makes you focus on like the core of legal strategy, argumentation, all of that.
Right. And that's exactly what today's deep dive is all about, the world of mooting. We're going to be dissecting excerpts from, let's see, it's called Mooting, the definitive guide to a key legal skill, to really understand what makes this practice so valuable. And not just for, aspiring lawyers, but really for anyone who loves a good intellectual challenge.
Yeah, it's like, think of it like this, the difference between watching like a master class on chess strategy versus, actually playing a match. That's what mooting is. It throws you right into the heart of like legal thinking.
And one of the things that makes it so unique is its focus on appealing court decisions. So we're talking about really dissecting those legal arguments, not just, determining guilt or innocence based on evidence.
Exactly. It's like, imagine a case where a lower court has already issued a ruling and then one of the parties thinks, wait, hold on, the court, they didn't apply the law right?
Okay.
So that's where the appeal comes in, right? And that's the scenario that mooting really tries to like simulate. So no juries, no witnesses, just pure legal argument.
So less, law and order and more Supreme Court. You've got barristers battling it out over these fine points of law.
Yeah, and speaking of courtroom battles, the guide actually mentions Sir Walter Raleigh's treason trial way back in 1603. And apparently the Attorney General at the time, he did not mince words. He straight up told Raleigh, "Thou art a monster. Thou hast an English face, but a Spanish heart." Like, can you imagine that happening in a moot today? Or any courtroom, really?
Talk about a hostile work environment, right? I mean, it really highlights just how much legal advocacy has really evolved, over the centuries. But why did mooting even emerge in the first place?
Well, for centuries now, advocates have played, a very, very important role in our justice systems, right? So mooting basically acts as a sort of training ground. It allows these aspiring lawyers, these legal eagles, to kind of hone those really important advocacy skills and to do it in a controlled setting before the stakes get, really real.
So, I mean, some people might be thinking, okay, sure, mooting sounds intense and all, but what's in it for me? I'm not really, planning to argue before the Supreme Court anytime soon.
Right. Yeah, that's a fair point. But here's the thing, the skills that you actually hone through mooting, they're surprisingly transferable. Think of them like superpowers that you can use in all sorts of situations, not just, the courtroom.
Superpowers, huh? All right, well, now you've got my attention. So let's break this down. The guide specifically calls out research and analytical skills as a major benefit here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Mooting, it's not just about, kind of skimming through a few case summaries or something.
Yeah.
We're talking about really diving deep into those legal principles, understanding all the nuances of how they've been applied in different contexts, and then using that analysis to, to craft your arguments.
So it's like being a legal detective in a way. You're piecing together clues, constructing this rock-solid case.
Yeah, exactly. And just like, a good detective, you also need to be able to present your findings persuasively. Right. And that's where I think another set of mooting superpowers come in, which is public speaking and presentation skills.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you're essentially arguing your case in front of a judge, anticipating those counter arguments, thinking on your feet.
Exactly. It's like trial by fire, but, in a controlled environment. So you can experiment, you can get feedback, you can really refine your approach, all of that. And these skills, they go way beyond, just law too, right? Imagine, nailing that presentation in the boardroom, or confidently leading a team meeting, or even just, being able to articulate your thoughts clearly and effectively in any situation, really.
It's interesting you mentioned teamwork, because the guide also highlights collaboration as a key aspect of mooting. It's not just a solo endeavor, is it?
Oh, not at all. No. To have a successful moot, you need a really tight-knit team. Usually it's a lead and a junior counsel, and they have to be working, in perfect sync. They need to be able to anticipate each other's moves, support each other's arguments, really present a united front to the judge.
So it's like a carefully choreographed dance in a way. Every step needs to be precise and needs to be in harmony with, your partner.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, because each member of the team has a specific role to play, and their success really hinges on their ability to, to collaborate effectively. And honestly, that's just like, any high-stakes project or endeavor, right?
Speaking of roles, I'm actually kind of curious about the whole structure of like a moot. So let's take a little peek inside a typical moot courtroom, shall we?
Sure. Okay, so picture this. You walk into a room and it's set up like a traditional courtroom. You've got the judge's bench at the front, but instead of like a jury box, there are two teams, and they're facing the judge, the appellant, and the respondent.
So just to be clear, the appellant is the side that's appealing the lower court's decision,
Yeah.
right? And then the respondent is defending that original decision.
Got it. And each side usually has, like we said, that lead counsel and a junior counsel. Yeah. And they each have like their own specific responsibilities.
So we've got these two teams, right, facing off, each one with their lead counsel, their junior counsel. What happens next? This is where like the legal showdown begins, right?
Yeah, pretty much. So the moot usually starts with, the appellant's lead counsel. They kind of lay out, like, here are our grounds for appeal, right?
Yep.
And they present their like main arguments.
Okay.
And then it's the respondent's turn, their lead counsel, that is. They have to like fire back, challenge the appellant's, their whole interpretation of the law. And of course, they present their own arguments.
So it really is like this like carefully choreographed like intellectual duel almost.
It is.
Each side is trying to, dismantle the other one's case while they're building up their own.
Yeah, and that's where those really sharp analytical skills we were talking about, they really come into play. Because, it's not enough to just like state your side. You have to like back it up, right?
Right.
Solid legal reasoning. The guide, it actually emphasizes this, that like a winning argument, it's concise, it's well-reasoned, and it's very firmly grounded in those established legal principles.
So like no throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Right, exactly.
You're building this like meticulously structured argument, like brick by legal brick.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of building a case, the guide also, it stresses how important it is to use like the right materials. Like it reminds us that those primary sources of law, the statutes, the case law, that needs to be like the cornerstone of your argument, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like you don't want to be, in the middle of a Supreme Court argument citing a Wikipedia article as your
right, exactly.
To go to the source.
Exactly. And secondary sources like your textbooks, your legal journals, all that. I mean, they can be helpful, of course, for understanding the law, but they shouldn't be like your main weapon in a moot, or really any legal argument for that matter.
Right. Okay, so let's say you've got all the right tools, all the legal tools, but what about those situations where, like, the law itself, it's open to interpretation, it's kind of murky. What do you do then?
That's when things get really, really interesting. But, the guide, it does caution against, like, speculating on facts. So as a mooter, you need to really stick to like the facts that you've been given in those case materials. And then your job is to like apply the law to those very specific circumstances.
So no going off on these like wild tangents, trying to like invent some new plot twist to try to, sway the judge.
Right, exactly. No, it has to be like very disciplined, focused argumentation, which honestly, that's a really valuable skill to have in any situation, don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, how often do we all, jump to conclusions or make assumptions when we don't have all the facts?
Oh, all the time.
Right.
Yeah, it's human nature. But mooting, it forces you to like slow down,
Oh.
Analyze the information you've got and then really build your arguments on solid ground.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
And, that brings us back to that idea of like transferable skills. Mooting, it isn't just about, training lawyers. It's about really cultivating this kind of critical thinking, persuasive communication, effective collaboration. And honestly, those are skills that are essential for anything you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive here into this world of mooting, it's clear that, this practice, it offers some really valuable lessons for everyone, not just aspiring lawyers. I mean, it's about honing those mental muscles that we all use to, navigate this world that's just overflowing with information and all these competing perspectives.
Yeah, it's about, learning to think critically, argue persuasively, collaborate effectively. These are skills that are honestly more relevant than ever, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. So we've demystified the purpose of mooting. We explored the structure. We even uncovered some secrets, right, to crafting that winning argument. So whether you are, a law student or just somebody who's fascinated by this kind of like the intricacies of legal strategy, hopefully this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the power and honestly the intellectual thrill of mooting.
It is. And remember, even if you never, step foot in a courtroom yourself, that ability to really analyze information, to construct a compelling argument, to advocate for your ideas, that is a superpower. It really is.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the fascinating world of mooting. And until next time, keep those arguments sharp and those minds even sharper.